All right. Welcome to another live stream. We're getting close to the end here. Um, Today is the 28th of November, and the goal today is to edit 4 chapters, just like we did yesterday. So hopefully it won't take too long to get started on that. And maybe if we're lucky, you could maybe even have some time for some questions, but we'll just have to see how that goes. Let me actually look through what we got here. So we got as far as chapter 18 yesterday. We're going to do 19 through 22. Got 1,100 words on this chapter, 1,300 words on that chapter, 1,700 words, and then 1,300 words. So these should go actually pretty quick. Unless I feel like I need to regenerate the chapter, which is possible. Looking at these really low word counts, I would say that is possible. Hopefully not, but we'll just have to see how it goes. It might be easier to just take what it has and give it certain sections and ask it to flesh it out so it's showing more than telling, that sort of thing. But we'll just have to see how it goes. So, with that low word count, unless I have to regenerate things, it shouldn't take too long. So, assuming all goes well, I will hopefully have some time for chat for some questions at the end if you have them. So be sure to let me know. And with that in mind, let's just go ahead and start. I already took a look at the beginning of this one, and I'm going to have to rewrite some of this beginning. This whole thing. Actually, this line here is good. I want to keep that. We'll say from outside the cabin. Let's see. How did we end the last chapter? Mina shot to her feet, still in her nightgown, shock punching her through her gut. A tall, rail-thin man stood watching them with a grotesque grin, wild-haired frame. All right, she had heard the rumors, but the reality practically struck her in the face. Renfield, still alive. What are you doing here, Renfield? She asked. Strategically placing herself between the man and her husband. And I'm going to use Claude to expand on this. Here is a scene I am currently writing. I'm going to give it the last little bit of chapter 18. So it has some context, and then I'm going to grab the first bit that I just wrote here. And I'm just going to give it that for now, because I know how this new Claude works. It's giving me some ideas for continuing the scene. Not too bad. Um, Renfield taunts Mina, calling. Actually, I'm going to use some of this, calling her a traitor to vampires everywhere. He hints that he was involved in the undead attack in the caves outside of Castle Dracula. And that he has been chosen to make sure they do not reach England. Mina attacks him, but in the attack she learns that Renfield is now a vampire too, which explains why he is alive. He taunts her more, and then the scene ends with this phrase, and we'll get just the first line of what's coming, and we'll see how that does with that. Have him taunt her before she tries to strike him. No, that's not okay. That's not what I wanted. Let's try this again. So I'll give it that first. And then I'll have to wait for it to finish that. Then I'll take this prompt and try it again, but slightly different. Let's try continuing with this beat, story beat. No, I'll say, please continue the chapter with this story beat. Renfield taunts Mina, calling her a traitor to vampires everywhere. He hints that he has been involved. Yeah, that should be good, hopefully. All right. Yeah, this will work. I have to edit it down, but it'll work. The one nice thing I will say about giving it a section of your manuscript that you've done so far and then asking it to continue, the prose it gives you is much better. Like, sometimes when I'm just generating a chapter I'm trying to do, um, and I'm trying to like write it over and over and over again, generating it to get the perfect thing, it would be a lot easier just say, here's what I've got. Please continue. So stuff like that. But anyway, let's go through this. Oh, no. What are you doing here? Ignored her question. Spittle flying from his lips. Cavorting with a mortal, it's disgraceful. Mina straightened, outrage simmering. Inside her. I don't have to explain myself to the likes of you. Renfield threw back his head and cackled. Oh, but you should. Madame Harker. I was there that night in the caves. Though you never saw me. I witnessed the awakening of our undead, we'll say cousins instead of brethren. And now we are getting ready to unleash them all on the world, thanks to you. But now I have one more task. And what's that? Said Mina, tensing. I've come to punish the treacherous Mina Harker. He said with a grin. I've come to make sure none of you make it back to England alive. With a feral scream, Mina launched herself at Renfield, claws outstretched. He staggered back with an oof as surprised that she made the first move. And she slammed into him. Mina wrapped her hands around his neck, squeezing with... Seems to like the word preternatural. Preternatural. I need to add that to my words not to use list. With all her strength. But something was wrong. Renfield said there was the grave-like... I'll say, or rather, the lack thereof. Realization crashed over Mina. You're a vampire. She choked out in horror. Choked out in horror seems... We can just leave that one blank, I think. Renfield cackled, prying her hands away. Dracula's gift. Now I can continue his glorious work. His sharp fangs glinted wetly as he gave her a mock bow. Because they're grappling with each other, so we'll say as he inclined his head in a mock bow. So far, Jonathan had done the smart thing and remained silent. That's when the first screams erupted from outside the cabin. All right. Nightgown. All right, now you got to figure out how said Renfield. I see you here, my mistress at work. One of them, anyway. Well, let's see. Taking a step forward. Did you really think we would let you live? No. Did you really think she would let you... Oh man, this is taking a while. Let you travel all the way home when we could so easily ambush you on the way. You should feel lucky. Yeah. I'll say you should pride yourself. Very few of our hunts require so much manpower. Manpower is the wrong word. Require so many even our non-vampire thralls are here, eager for a chance to prove themselves as I have. They... ... But Mina was done. With a crash... Oops. With a crash, she launched herself again at Renfield. This time, the momentum of her attack carried them both through the cabin door and onto the deck outside. All right, and then we say, now we kind of come back to where it had already generated. As she stood, she caught glimpses of terrified passengers fleeing some unseen horror. Her intuition screamed that she already knew. She looked, but already knew what lurked ahead. She skidded to a halt as she reached this. She ran. No. We can just delete that sentence. There, crouched over the prone form of an elderly man, was the auburn-haired bride they had encountered in Dracula's lair in the caves. The vampire looked up, blood dripping from her grinning mouth, pale features cast in the moonlight. Mina suppressed a shudder at the sight of those soulless black eyes. Mina braced herself. This would not be an easy fight. Jonathan, Mina yelled over her shoulders. We'll say, hoping that he could hear her from inside the cabin. Find Abraham quickly. She didn't have time to check if he obeyed before the bride launched herself forward in a blur. Mina clenched her jaw, bracing herself as deadly claws lashed toward her throat. She twisted aside, but too slow. Razor-sharp nails grazed her neck in a blaze of pain. Mina ignored the sting, whipping out a crucifix. Oh boy. That doesn't work. We'll just say, and dropped into a defensive crouch. The bride merely laughed, an awful rasping sound, as she circled Mina with a predatory gaze. This will have to go. This prose isn't quite as good. She spared a glance for Jonathan, but couldn't see him anywhere. Had he heard her? As if in response, she heard him shout, followed by a violent scuffle behind her. Risking a glance, she spotted Jonathan struggling between two burly crewmen who had seized him, their craggy faces impassive. More sailors closed in around them, expressions vacant, moving with unnatural coordination. I'll just say moving together. Thralls. The thralls Renfield spoke of. Despair threatened to overwhelm Mina. I'll just say Mina swallowed as she took in their predicament. Somehow the vampires had not only tracked but trapped them, cutting off their avenues of escape. And now Jonathan was in their grasp as well, limiting what she could do. The bride's smirk widened as though reading Mina's thoughts. I will finish what my master began, she hissed. Mina tightened her grip. There's no crucifix here. They traded blows in a dizzying blur of motion. Mina's reactions felt, there's that word, preternaturally. Mina's reactions were quick, though she remained untrained compared to her foe's centuries of experience. Claws raked her arm as she stumbled back with a cry. The bride pressed her advantage. Grinning. Dimly, Mina heard Renfield barking orders to barricade the hatch leading below. That meant sealing off Sherlock and Abraham. Her eyes darted around, seeking anything to help turn the tide. But they were trapped, backed against the rail with foes on all sides. With the bride on one side, Renfield on the other, and thralls everywhere else. She blinked sweat from her eyes, raising her fist, preparing to fight on. The bride fainted left, then drove her shoulder into Mina's chest like a battering ram. The air rushed from Mina's lungs as she crashed backward into a pile of crates, wooden shards digging into her back. Dazed, she looked up to see the vampire looming over her, talons clamped around her throat, lifting her like a rag doll. Mina thrashed and kicked to no avail. The bride's grip was iron. We'll say clamped, like iron. As darkness crept into Mina's vision, a shout drew the vampire's attention. Jonathan had broken free in the distraction and now aimed a revolver with trembling hands. Oh yeah. He must have, judging by the faces of the men who had held Jonathan, he must have taken the gun from one of them. Let her go, Jonathan commanded. His voice surprisingly resolute. The bride's lip curled into a sneer. With casual brutality, she hurled Mina sideways into the mast. Pain exploded through Mina's body, and she collapsed, gasping to the deck. Through blurry eyes, she watched helplessly as the bride closed. As the bride closed on Jonathan. With one hand, she with one hand, the bride slapped the pistol away. The other struck Jonathan's face like a sledgehammer. He spun from the force of the blow and sprawled. Let's say, slammed the pistol away just as Jonathan got in a shot. He spun with the force of the blow and sprawled, unmoving across the boards. The bride grabbed a fistful of sped forward, grabbed a fistful of his hair, yanking his head to the side to expose his vulnerable neck. No, Mina screamed hoarsely, clawing her way up the mast. We'll just say up. But she could only watch as lethal fangs pierced Jonathan's flesh. He jerked once, then went limp. He jerked once. Eyes wide and limbs taut, then went limp. The bride cast his body aside and turned to Mina with a satisfied leer, blood staining her lips. Rage and anguish warred within Mina. Mina welcomed the cold determination settling over her. She would see this bride ended if that meant her own death as well. She rose on steady feet, crucifix at the ready. With a resounding crash, the barricaded hatch exploded outward in a hail of wooden fragments. Abraham Van Helsing surged up from below decks, face contorted in fury. He tore into the scattered crew with terrible speed, hurling one over the railing to land in the dark waters with a distant splash. The bride circled Mina warily. Okay, we need to add a bit here. Here is the story, or we'll say the chapter so far. Can you continue this to show that both Renfield and the bride are surprised at Van Helsing's appearance, especially when he starts to show vampire. Oh, no. They would know that he is a vampire at this point. And the battle should turn. And Renfield should be taken by surprise, with Van Helsing eventually driving a stake into his chest. We'll see if it does that. It might. Oh, no, it is doing it. Huh. Alright, this isn't perfect, but Renfield's head jerked toward the exploded hatch, surprise flashing across his face. And Van Helsing's sudden appearance. You are not. No. Apparently, they underestimated Van Helsing abilities. That would likely be one of the last regrets many of them had. The auburn-haired bride likewise halted her advance on Mina, eyes widening at the elderly hunter bursting from below. A hint of uncertainty crossed her feral features. There's that preternatural speed. Insane speed. Van Helsing dispatched two more thralls in quick succession before turning his attention on Renfield. Face contorted with rage, he launched himself at Dracula's former acolyte. Renfield was not expecting the hunter's ferocity and stepped back a step too slow. Van Helsing slammed into him, driving them both to the deck. Before Renfield could react, Van Helsing had plunged a sharpened stake deep into the mad vampire's chest. Renfield howled in agony, thrashing beneath the hunter, but the stake pinned him in place. Van Helsing leaned close, eyes blazing. This is for Arthur. Renfield convulsed once, then vanished into ash. Van Helsing turned from the vampire's crumbling corpse to face the remaining attackers. The bride hesitated only a moment before fury twisted her features. She sprang. We'll say the bride hesitated only a moment before turning back to Mina, circling her warily. When she launched, with a glance at Abraham, Mina sent him a nonverbal signal. She would deal with this one. Their eyes met, and Mina sent him. We'll say Mina gave him a slight nod, which he returned. She would deal with, we'll just say, the bride. They exchanged a rapid series of blows, but Mina could tell her opponent was only toying with her now. So she waited for an opening, muscles coiled. When the vampire overextended on a vicious swipe, Mina struck. Her fist plunged deep into the bride's chest. An ear-piercing shriek rent the air as the bride crumbled to ash. Whoa. A fist with a hawthorn stake in it. An ear-piercing shriek rent the air as the bride crumbled to ash before Mina's eyes. Mina stood panting. Let's say the scream seemed to linger long after the bride was gone. The remaining thralls stood silently, as if in shock at what had just happened. They had just lost both of their vampire leaders. Mina stood panting among the drifting acids and tattered garments of her foe. It was over. But as she turned to check on Jonathan, her breath caught at the sight awaiting her across the deck. Van Helsing stood frozen over Jonathan's body, scarlet staining his lips. Yeah, this is kind of giving the impression that he had just... We'll just say his whole body heaving at the sight of the blood pooling beneath. The limp form, something seemed to fracture in the professor's expression. An inhuman roar erupted from his throat, and he turned on the remaining thralls And then they began to die. Mina watched in dismay as the gentle, scholarly man she knew unleashed a savagery she hadn't thought him capable of. Her calls for him to stop went unheeded. I'm going to ask it to expand this paragraph. Please flesh out this sequence so we get more of Van Helsing's actions. I should have asked it to show more than tell. I need to do like a find and replace for all instances of the word preternatural and make sure I only use it no more than once. Ooh, that's not bad. So this is a good example of where I saw it and I was just like, this is giving me not enough. This is like really skimming over things. So, well, Mina could only watch in dismay as the normally gentle, scholarly man she knew unleashed a savagery she hadn't thought him capable of. With preternatural speed, he tore into the remaining thralls, still barricading the hatch. Abraham, well, I guess they wouldn't be barricading the hatch, would they? Let's just get rid of that. Abraham, no, Mina cried out, but her calls went unheeded, lost in the fury of his assault. She could only cringe at the awful sounds of bones cracking and flesh tearing. In mere moments, Van Helsing had ripped through the barricade. Remaining thralls. In a whirlwind of violence, the men lay strewn like broken dolls in his wake. Chest heaving, he turned blazing eyes. The last of the victims. Actually, I'm going to have to change that. The bride is already dead at this point. Rewrite that with that in mind. No, it didn't get that right. Let's just... If he heard her cries, he gave no indication. With brutal efficiency, he wrenched... the final man's head back and fed. The Mina had no idea who the man was or what had possessed him to follow the leadership of the brides. But revulsion shuddered through Mina as she saw what Van Helsing was doing. She screamed, thrashing. No. telling Abraham to stop reminding him of his oath. But it was no use. He drank deep as the man's struggles weakened, then slowed, until finally his body went limp. Van Helsing cast the pale husk aside, face and shirt front dark with blood. Okay, that's good. He turned to Mina then, but she recoiled with a strangled gasp. The scholarly gentleman she had known was gone, replaced by a predator with eyes. I guess we already do the scholarly gentleman thing? We'll just say professor she had known was gone, replaced by a predator with eyes like polished flint. His features had smoothed into an unlined mask, raven hair replacing silver. He had reverted to the deadly prime of his youth. Mina scrambled back in horror from the blood-drenched stranger advancing on her. Mina opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Van Helsing glanced around wildly at the bodies littering the deck. With a tortured cry, he hurled himself over the rail. Mina rushed to the side, but saw only an ebony bat winging away into the night. I'm going to ask it to please flesh out this sequence to show more than tell. That's good. Mina opened her mouth to speak, but the question formed on her lips died away. Abraham's head jerked up, nostrils flaring as it feverish gaze darted around the ravaged deck. His eyes, still flat and predatory, took in the broken corpses scattered around them. A guttural cry tore from his throat. With sudden violence, he spun from Mina, muscular frame visibly trembling. She reached out a tentative hand, lips forming his name, when abruptly he hurled himself atop the wooden railing lining the ship's deck. Mina surged upright with a strangled shout, but Abraham had already flung himself outward into the empty space from above the black, roiling sea. Mina rushed to the rail, hands gripping the slick wood. She scanned the waters below, squinting desperately through the darkness. There was no sign of him in the wine-dark waves. Then a flash of movement caught her eye, and she glanced up with a gasp. An ebony shape swooped low over the ship, a bat with a 6-foot wingspan, almost man-like in dimensions. It banked across the moon's pallid face before winging rapidly out over the sea. Mina watched numbly as the bat faded to a speck, then winked out of sight. Abraham Van Helsing was gone, disappeared into the gloom after that savage display. Behind her, the ravaged deck still reeked of gore and death. With a trembling breath, Mina turned away from the rail. She was alone now amidst the aftermath and horror. She collapsed to her knees on the blood-slicked boards, surrounded by death and destruction. They had survived, but at a terrible price. Mina bowed her head and wept as the ship sailed onward to the shores of England. We don't need that last sentence. That's a good place to end right there. Okay. So we expanded this chapter significantly. It was at like like 1,400 words or something like that. And now we're at 2,000. So that's good, but that also means we took some time to get there. So we're going to go ahead and move on to chapter 20. I'll see if there are any questions here. Juan asks, do you plan to sell these books? Yes, this one I do plan to sell. And I will notify people when it is ready to sell. Although I'm going to encourage you not to buy it from Amazon when it is ready and on Amazon, because that would affect the algorithm. I would only say buy it from Amazon if this is the kind of book you would buy anyway. Otherwise, you're going to confuse the algorithm and it's not going to show it to the right people. So, all right, so moving on to chapter 20, 1,300 words. Mina surveyed the chaotic scene on the ship's deck. Ash swirled in the wind, the remains of the vampire Renfield and the vampire bride drifting away. Her abandoned dress lay in a heap, a final testament to the monster's destruction. There's the word testament. That one comes out a lot in ChatGPT. You don't see it as often in Claude. A final... Yeah, we don't even need that whole phrase. Around Mina, Van Helsing and the others had subdued or killed the bride's minions. Blood slicked the wood planks. The bride's minions lay in wet heaps. Blood slicked the wooden planks. Most bodies lay in a congealing pool. Necks savaged by Van Helsing's teeth. A wide-eyed Sherlock Holmes emerged from below decks, where he had apparently chosen not to participate in the fight. Mina pushed down her, we'll just say he was smart. But Mina only had eyes for Jonathan. Her husband spasmed on the deck, limbs twitching, eyes rolling back. His neck oozed from 2 puncture wounds. Even from a distance, Mina could tell the change beginning in him. A familiar shiver ran through her. And yet, hope bloomed in Mina's chest. If the vampire curse now flowed through Jonathan's veins, it meant he would not die. He would become like her, and they could finally get together as equals. No more divide would separate them. She wouldn't be so alone. He's turning, she said to Sherlock. He'll heal. The wounds will close up. Sherlock said nothing, features grim as he analyzed Jonathan's transformation. Jonathan thrashed and grabbed as she leaned in. Thrashed. Mina stooped lower to help, and he grabbed her arm. A cough His voice wheezed as he tried to say something. Mina leaned in. Kill me, he choked out. Don't let me become. Mina recoiled, certain she misheard. You're confused, Jonathan. You need... But Jonathan shook his head violently, confirming what he said. I can't be like you, he asked. Not a demon, not that horror. Slowly, his true meaning sank in. Despite everything, Jonathan still viewed vampires as abhorrent monsters. The prospect of turning repulsed him so deeply that he now begged for death instead. He would rather die than exist at her side for eternity. The horror settled into her stomach, far colder than any cold she had ever experienced. He would rather die than exist at her side for eternity. No, Mina cried. I won't do it. I can't kill you. Jonathan's fingers dug into her wrist. Surprising strength in their grip. Please, this is my choice. You chose differently. Tears blurred Mina's vision. How could Jonathan ask this? After all they'd sacrificed, she looked beseechingly at Sherlock. Tell him to stop this madness. The detective just mutely shook his head. It's not my place. Desperate, Mina asked, what do you think I should do? Sherlock's expression turned thoughtful. If it were me turning, I cannot say I would choose differently than Jonathan. Mina whirled back to her husband. He had dragged himself up, leaning now on the ship's railing. She could see the vitality already working through him. Soon the vampire blood would complete its hold. Look at me, Jonathan whispered. Reluctantly, Mina obeyed. His eyes burned into hers. This is my choice, he told her firmly. I love you. I always will. Gently he touched his forehead to hers. I'll be waiting. Tears coursed down Mina's face. She clutched Jonathan tight, as if her arms could restrain death itself. I can't. Please don't make me do this. Jonathan pried himself loose. I know you can't. Before Mina could react, Jonathan snatched one of the wooden stakes from her belt and drew closer. No. Jonathan drew closer. So holding her like he had the night during the night. Their lips touched before he said, I know. Before Mina could react, Jonathan snatched one of the wooden stakes from her belt. With a swift plunge, he buried it deep into his own heart. His anguished face melted instantly into ash. Mina's screams echoed over the night-darkened ocean. Her wrenching sobs carried on the wind a tragic symphony of loss. She crumpled to the deck, heedless of all around her. I'm going to say here is more of a chapter that I have written. I'd like to flesh out the last line to show more than tell. Not bad, not bad. You'll notice what I'm doing here is some of these sections that I'm asking it to expand and show more than tell are some of the pivotal moments. That just need a little more attention drawn to them. They get really, we just want to dwell in that moment just a little longer. And so when people talk about show, don't tell, what they're really talking about is pay closer attention to important moments and less attention on less important moments. So you'll have some moments where you just say, and they traveled from here to there, and you're really just telling, you're not showing, and that's fine. And then you get moments like this where you want to like really kind of savor it and describe it in a number of different ways. And this is one of the ways that you do that. She collapsed to her knees amidst the swirling ashes on the deck, hands clutching at nothing. Her shoulders shook with the force of her sobs as grief overwhelmed her senses. Through vision blurred by tears, she spotted the stake Jonathan had used, now fallen and stained red. At the sight, another wail erupted from deep within her. The sound carried on the wind, echoing the fathomless void. Mina bent forward, forehead pressed hard against the rough planks, as if she could force the pain back inside through sheer pressure. Her fist pounded futilely on the deck. Actually, I don't think we need this whole paragraph. We can just skip right to that. Nails splitting against the wood, she screamed again and again until her voice gave out, rendered hoarse and broken. Violent tremors racked her slender frame. The anguish poured forth in a ceaseless tide. We don't really need this chapter or this paragraph either. The ship rocked gently on the night sea swells, oblivious to Mina's suffering. Her wretched sobs stretched endlessly over the waves, to be swallowed by the pitiless dark. That's pretty good. Whew. It's a big moment. I think the rest of this is actually not good. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because I'm looking at it and it seems more like, oh, actually that's supposed to be the end of the chapter. That's actually appropriate. It'll be a short chapter, but so the end of the chapter is her wretched sobs stretched endlessly over the waves to be swallowed by the pitiless dark. That's actually a great place to end a chapter. This is going to make it a very short chapter, only 600 words. But it's an important chapter. And I think I split this. I think it used to be part of chapter 19, and I just made it its own chapter. I think that's fine. All right, moving on to chapter 21 then. Halfway there. See how I see a lot of you talking in the chat. That's awesome. Um, so Debbie, you asked at the beginning, did I start the chat with Claude by telling it to remember my style and my story? Not really. I just sort of gave it what I had, and it's really good at continuing in the similar style. So I don't really need to give it so much of a style prompt when I asked it to just continue what I just finished. When it has something to go on, and it's literally just continuing like the next line. It does a pretty good job actually. Um, and I could give it more context. Like I could probably have given it the character profiles and things like that. But a lot of this I don't necessarily need. Like I'm not generating entire chapters or anything, and so I don't necessarily need all that. I just need to expand certain sections and stuff like that. So, um, Ray and Robin, I feel like I don't know if you guys knew each other before this, but you seem to be coming along with a nice friendship there. So, um, Rob Leach says, "Can you tell me how to get to Amazon publishing templates?" So I don't use templates. That is a way you could go if you have like Word, but for formatting with Word is a pain. I'm using Atticus here. This is a formatting program, and it's easily going to be the easiest and best option for formatting a book so that it is ready to publish on Amazon. So that would be my recommendation there. Um, Rob says, I'm really trying to get prompts that will give me a good outline. That way I can organize my poorly done outline and it will hopefully show me where I have gaps that need to be filled. Yep. You don't necessarily have to have an outlining template. I mean, it helps. The 24 chapter novel outline is my favorite. It's what I use for this novel to get me started. But yeah. Evolution DL1 says, does Poe have the older version of Claude, meaning Claude 1.3, and is it better than Claude 2, by the way? Claude 1.3, so if we're talking like Claude 1 with the 100K token limit, is not better than Claude 2. Claude 2 is still, I think, my favorite. Claude 2.1 is actually starting to be okay. As you can see, we've done some kind of gruesome stuff here in this last chapter, and I was using 2.1 for that, and it did fine. We've found out that my suspicions were confirmed that it wasn't necessarily because it was trying to be more woke. It was just coming off that way because there was something in the way we were prompting it that was wrong, and the way it had been trained to respond to prompts was wrong. And so there's a little bit of two things here. One, you can learn to prompt 2.1 better, and I have instructions on how to do that because it still doesn't do things exactly the way 2.0 worked. So you have to prompt it differently, and I'll have a whole video about that. But the other thing is they have been working on it. Not a lot of people have been dissatisfied with it, and not just in author space. A lot of people in other spaces as well. And so I understand that they have been working on it, and you can kind of tell it's been getting better at responding to certain inquiries. So if you want access to 2.0, Poe is the best way to get access to that. And I didn't answer the first part of your question. Yes, Poe does have all of the past. Well, I don't know about all, but some of the past models before Claude 2. So yeah, you are able to access it and play around with it if you want. So, all right, let's get into chapter 21 here. I'm gonna try and zoom in here so y'all can see this a little better. When Mina and Sherlock finally arrived in England, now the only two surviving members of their party, do nothing but walk off the ship. Mina. What remaining sailors were still alive had barely managed to get them the rest of the way home. But nothing mattered anymore. Not the brides, not the strange undead creatures they encountered in Romania, not even Dracula coming back. None of it mattered without Jonathan. Over the next few days, Mina shuffled aimlessly down the damp London streets, pulling her cloak tightly around her against the chill. The clicking of her boots on the cobblestones echoed around her, emphasizing her eyes. We don't need that sentence. She barely registered the bustle of horses and carriages passing by, or the raucous laughter spilling from the pubs. Her icy blue eyes, once so piercing, now gazed unseeing into the distance. All she could think about was Jonathan's face, his warm smile, his steadfast loyalty, now gone forever. She replayed his final moments in her mind, clutching his hand as the life drained out of him, his piercing blue eye. Clutching his hand as he staked himself, and that hand turned to ash. His last rasping words would not leave her ears. We'll just say instead of rasping words. His last request would not leave her ears. And let me go back to chapter 20 here so I can make sure. All right. Kill me. Don't let me become her husband was dead, the man she loved most in this world. How could she go on without him by her side? Mina aimlessly wandered the streets of London for hours, lost in her grief and self-loathing. She ignored the pangs of thirst clawing at her throat. She didn't care if she never fed again. Perhaps she could just waste away to nothing, but deep down she knew the cursed blood flowing through her veins would never allow that. She was damned to an eternity of darkness, forever cut off from the light that was Jonathan. When the faintest glow of dawn crept over the horizon, Mina slipped back to the abandoned attic she had claimed as her lair. Into a abandoned attic she had claimed as her lair. She collapsed onto the moth-eaten blanket in the corner, drew her knees to her chest, and surrendered to gut-wrenching sobs. Her small body shook with the force of her grief. She longed to drive a stake through her own cursed heart, but could not defy. We'll skip that. As exhaustion finally claimed her, she drifted off to a fitful sleep. She prayed she would not wake again. Sherlock had offered to meet with her at her home when they first arrived back in London, but Mina refused, leaving him the moment they arrived and she could get away. She stopped only once at John Seward's house to pick up a few of her things. John was there, and he immediately rose and asked her eagerly how the Transylvanian expedition went, clearly not expecting her to return for a few more days. This is a good example here, this paragraph, about when you do want to tell instead of show, because we're just kind of skipping over a few things um, that aren't really important that we go into them in too much detail. Mina remained silent, her face an impassive mask. When John inquired cheerfully where the others were about Arthur and Jonathan, Mina felt fresh tears well up, spilling down her pale cheeks. She was unable to form any words, only wiped futilely at her eyes with her lace handkerchief. Dr. Seward's excited smile faded as he grasped something was terribly wrong, but Mina turned and rushed from the study without explanation, his word shouts echoing after her. See, that's all really good telling. She spent her nights roaming the streets while hiding in the abandoned for no real reason. While hiding in the abandoned attic during the day, as the last rays of sun faded, she would emerge again like the creature of darkness she had become. She spoke to no one, made eye contact with no one. She was a ghost drifting through the crowds, disconnected and numb. One night she was out trying to distract herself from replaying Jonathan's death over and over in her mind, along with his last haunting words to her. So she hunted the dregs of society on the street, the thieves, drunkards, and abusers, wielding her supernatural strength against them, helped distract her from the gaping void inside. As she prowled the alleyway, she heard a child scream in terror. We'll say one night, as she prowled the alleyway, she heard a child scream in terror. Mina raced toward the sound with inhuman speed, her instincts taken over despite her grief. As Mina, it's like repeating bits of that. Not sure I like that. She turned the corner to find a hulking brute of a man accosting a struggling child. "Shut it, you little rat," the man bellowed, delivering a savage backhand blow across the boy's cheek. The child cried out in pain, clutching his face. "That's enough of that," the man snarled. "One more peep out of you, and you'll get worse than that, I promise you." He shook the boy violently by the arm, eliciting more sobs. Mina's blood ran cold as she heard the man add in a guttural growl. "Now, behave yourself. We got a client paying good money for you, pretty little lad like you." An inferno of rage ignited within Mina's chest. This filth. This human monster. He was the dregs of society that she longed. A child predator trafficking innocent lives. Something primal and feral awoke in Mina, overriding her grief and despair. She wanted, no, needed, to destroy this piece of scum. As Abraham had destroyed the thralls of the brides on the ship. With blinding speed, Mina shot across the alley and slammed into the brute with the force of a locomotive. He released the boy and crashed into the opposite wall, the wind knocked out of him. Before he could react, Mina was upon him, raining blows down in a blur. "You will never touch another child," Mina shouted, emphasizing each word with another crushing strike. Bones cracked under her knuckles, blood spraying. The man tried to scream, but only gurgled wetly as Mina lost all control, unleashing her full vampiric strength. Her vision washed red with fury. In mere seconds, the man was reduced to a pulped mess beneath her assault. Woo! Claude wrote this, you guys. That wasn't me. As her rage ebbed, Mina found herself panting unnecessarily, flecks of gore staining her pale cheeks. She became aware of a high-pitched screaming and whirled to see the boy, not rescued but traumatized, staring at her in utter... Well, he is rescued, technically. Traumatized, staring at her in utter horror. Mina finally ceased, breathing hard through the exertion breathing hard, though the exertion was nothing for her. Vampiric stamina for her. She glanced down at the battered and broken man, then became aware. Oh, see, it's repeating this again. That's weird. Mina hesitated, then took a step toward him, hands raised, trying to say it was all right, that she was there to help him. But the boy was inconsolable, terrified by the violence he had just witnessed. He turned and fled the alley before Mina could utter a word. She watched him vanish into the night, then turned back to survey the pulp mess of a man she had left behind. Revulsion swept over her. She staggered backward, horrified by what she had done in her rage. Jonathan's voice echoed again in her mind. Let's see. Let's grab the actual quote that he said. Here we go. I can't be like you, not a demon, not that horror. Was he right? Was she doomed to become the very kind of monster she had vowed to fight? To be a creature of darkness, no matter how she struggled against it? Bile arose in her throat as she looked at the bloody results of her handiwork. She fled the alley, dry heaving, before she could be tempted to feed. Mina ran through the night, Jonathan's voice a litany in her mind. She wept tearlessly, wailing aloud for Jonathan, for lost Lucy, for Arthur, for Quincy. Let's not forget Quincy. For all the lives devastated by vampires like her. She was no protector of the innocent. She was a plague upon the world. A scourge, an abomination. She retreated back to her empty attic refuge, collapsing in a heap in the corner. She drew her knees to her chest like a child and rocked herself weakly as sobs continued to rack her body. She thought of wise old Abraham Van Helsing, the closest thing to a father figure she had left. Now gone. Where was he now? Was he still raging well, okay, so he had been her mentor. Now he was gone too. Where was he now? Was he still raging mindlessly against the world like when they first turned him? Like he had on the ship? Had he completely lost his humanity to the bloodlust like he always feared? If so, he had been right to warn them all along about the curse of vampirism. In the end, they were all just monsters preying upon humanity. Those bleak thoughts consumed Mina's mind for days afterward as she languished in the self-imposed isolation within the dusty attic. She did not move from her spot in the corner except when the sun's rays forced her to retreat further into the shadows. She ignored the burning thirst, welcoming the pain. She hoped it would destroy her faster. If she was lucky, it would destroy her faster. In weaker moments, she contemplated driving a wooden stake through her breast, ending her suffering as Jonathan had implored her to end his. But she could not. But gradually, Mina's thoughts turned to what Jonathan would want her to do now. How would he tell her to handle this hopeless situation? But then Jonathan had been in her situation himself. New turn, despairing of his vampiric existence, and he had asked her to release him from it through death. Mina's hand closed reflexively around a piece of wood she had pulled from the rotting rafters. But she did not drive the improvised stake home. Instead, she considered, if Jonathan had thought death was the only solution for himself, did that mean she should think the same? What if she didn't have to die after all? Claude is trying to make this a little bit more positive. She could do it. She could drive the wood home and end it. She could see Jonathan again. No. If there was a heaven, or hell, Jonathan definitely belonged in the former, while she in the latter. There would be no more reuniting them. But her swirling thoughts were interrupted by a sharp rap against the trapdoor into the attic. We'll just say a sharp rap sounded against the trapdoor into the attic. What's like the onomatopoeia of a sharp rap? I mean, I would just say rap, rap, rap. Because tap, tap seems not rappy enough. Might as well ask. What is, if I can spell the word onomatopoeia? Onomatopoeia. Way to demonstrate a sharp rap on a door. Yeah, hopefully he knows what I mean. I don't think I spelled that correctly, but sometimes it... Crack. We'll use crack. 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 A sharp rap sounded against the trapdoor into the attic. Mina froze, every sense heightened in alarm. Then she detected the familiar scent and relaxed marginally as she heard Sherlock's baritone voice call up, "Mrs. Harker, we need to talk." Okay, that's good. It's our third chapter of the night. Moving on to chapter 22. Let's see how we're doing on overall word count for the book. We're at 52,000 words. It's gone up a little bit, so that's good. Mina reluctantly opened the trapdoor to the attic, letting Sherlock in. At first, she wanted to ask him how he found her, but then immediately thought better of it. Because of course he found her. He was Sherlock Holmes. What do you want? She asked tersely, her icy blue eyes peering at him. We don't need that. Sherlock's angular features were drawn in concern. I haven't been able to contact Watson since we arrived, he said, his voice. We already talked about his baritone voice. Apparently Watson had left. Would have left for Devonshire, but okay, we need to expand this paragraph. I need to expand this. Here, actually, we're going to pull up a new chat. Here is a chapter I'm working on now for your context. Please reply with no, that's not what I wanted. That's okay. I'll let it go. Please flesh out this sequence to show more than tell. No, that's not doing a very good job. I'll just say try again. Watson was contacted via telegram weeks earlier. Yeah, I'm not okay with any of that. I'm gonna have to write this myself. I sent the telegram weeks ago now, but he must still be in Devonshire. I thought he would have found the werewolves by now. Is that why you came to tell me about Watson? I'm not just that, he replied. I came to tell you the brides are still in London. I confirmed this, and they are still in the underground tunnels. But they haven't proceeded with their plans yet, obviously, or we would be swimming in a sea of undead. Mina nodded, her blonde hair shifting against her jawline. Of course they haven't proceeded with their plans, she replied, because they needed the ashes of Dracula, which were likely held by the bride we killed on the ship home. Sherlock shook his head, his piercing gray eyes meeting hers. Just say, meeting her gaze. I searched the ship thoroughly and found no such ashes, he told her. Now, why is it not... Let's try this again. Here is a chapter I'm currently writing. Please continue with this story beat. Yeah, this is good. Mina furrowed her brow, considering Sherlock's statement. Perhaps if there was a second bride that escaped Romania separately, she could have easily smuggled Dracula's ashes here without detection. Exactly, said Sherlock, steepling his fingers thoughtfully, which means they may already have what they need to raise the dead and build their army. I have their location. Now we just need a plan to defeat the two ancient immortal beings with you and I alone if necessary. Yeah, a good chunk of this is like not even written yet properly. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move to a new chat. Here is a chapter I'm currently writing. Please. Well, I'll say give me 3 options for how to continue. Just so I give it something to do. And I'm going to take the next chunk. Here is what I want to have happen. Please flesh this out to show more than tell. All right, this is good. Seems almost shorter. Yeah, that is shorter. Maybe I shouldn't have given it as much. Dang it. Let's try this again in the new chat. Here is what I'd like to add next, but I need to flesh it out to show more than tell. Please continue the story with these story beats fleshed out. Okay. Mina let the detective's work sink in, but grief still clouded her mind. Jonathan's death had hollowed her, leaving bitterness that filled the widening cracks in her broken heart. I honestly don't care what they do anymore. I want no part of it. Don't you want? What about revenge? Would you help me stop the brides in order to get revenge on what they did to your husband? Of course I want them to suffer as Jonathan suffered, she replied tonelessly. But what purpose would it serve? Another will always take evil's place. Perhaps I am fated to be the next vampire scourge plaguing London. Mina turned away. But she could feel Sherlock studying her. When he spoke, his voice was unexpectedly gentle. Jonathan cared for you to the last, but what's done cannot be undone. You underestimate your strength, Mina. The decisions that define a person are made each new day. Mina shook her head bitterly. I see blue eyes downcast. You did not see the horror in that man's face when I nearly took his life. The man I almost killed a few days ago. You did not see the horror in I think she killed him actually. In that child's face as he watched. The only definition I deserve is murderer. Then he spoke again. I once knew a man named Victor who fell in with the worst gang in London. He was no criminal, but his family was destitute and starving, and the gang offered prospects when no one else would. In time, Victor was sickened by the tests they made him perform and longed to be free of them, but the syndicate cared nothing for his qualms. They owned him. To define them was death. Man, this is a struggle. I'm going to say, please flesh out this conversation with Sherlock. Give Sherlock's full dialogue. Include, well, no, we'll say, give Sherlock's full dialogue and show, don't tell. Yeah, this is better. I once knew a man named Victor who found himself ensnared in the London underworld. He began. Bright young chap, but his father died when he was just a boy, leaving his mother struggling to feed a house full of hungry mouths. They lived hand to mouth in the East End slums. Sherlock's gaze grew distant, conjuring up memories. When Victor was 16, his mother took gravely ill. He went out each day trying to find what pitiful work he could, but the family was slowly starving. Then a local gang called the Black Mole Boys. I'm going to quickly look this up. Well, I'm going to say choose a different gang name. Ripper Street Thugs. Give me a list of 10 other possible gang names. The Lambeth Boys. Lambeth boys took notice. They saw a strong young lad, desperate to save his mum. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The black mole. There we go. The Lambeth boys took Victor under their wing, promising protection and payment if he ran errands for them. Of course, the jobs were illegal, delivering threats, standing guard, acting as a lookout. But when 5 younger siblings crying for hunger each night, what choice did Victor have? Sherlock absently tapped his fingers together. Actually, we can get rid of that. Over 2 years, Victor descended deeper into the underworld. He proved reliable and cunning, graduating to armed robbery and intimidation. Yet inside he felt revulsion growing at what his life had become. He dreamt of escape, but the Lambeth boys owned him utterly. To defy them was suicide. The detective held Mina's gaze intently. Get rid of that. Victor, worried he was forever damned, fated to live and die in the shadows, but ultimately he took a chance, came to me desperate to break free, knowing full well what would happen if he was caught. Continue Sherlock's story with this info. This is good. Victor was no fool. He knew confronting the gang openly was suicidal. The detective continued, so he bided his time. Let's say. So on my advisement, he bided his time, proving his ruthlessness and cunning, until the thugs elevated him to help guard their leader, a crime boss named Blackheart, who terrorized London for years. Sherlock's pale From Victor's new vantage, secrets leaked out. Plans for extortion, kidnapping, and murder. At first, Victor sent cryptic messages to Scotland, to me or Scotland Yard. As Blackheart's syndicate evaded authorities again and again, Victor grew bolder. He made contact anonymously, seeking me out. We're going to have to change something here. Rising, Sherlock began to pace before the fire, hands clasped. There is no fire. Across the dank attic. Hands clasped behind his back. It was a dangerous game. If discovered, Victor faced torturous death. Not only for himself, but for his family. But slowly, patiently, the intelligence he provided allowed Watson and I to unravel the layers of Blackheart's network, his political connections, his financial pipelines, his network of spies and informants. Sherlock turned, staring directly at Mina. It took 2 more years before we gathered enough evidence and allies to dismantle Blackheart's empire for good. He died behind bars. His gang dissolved into warring factions. And Victor, for his protection, I arranged passage to America aboard a T-Clipper. He could begin life anew. I arranged passage for him and his entire family to America aboard a T-Clipper. He could begin life anew, the past forever behind him. All right. What does all of that have to do with me? Mina asked softly, not following his point. You are like Victor, Sherlock replied gently. You became something you did not want to be against your will because of circumstance. And like Victor, you have done some horrible things as a result, but also like Victor, you now have an opportunity to make things right in a way that no one else can. Your gifts as a vampire allow you to go places and do things that no one else is capable of. Alright, we're almost done here, I think. Here is a chapter I'm currently writing. Please continue it with these story beats. Then I will add these 2 bits here that it didn't really fully flesh out. Here we go. Mina wondered at that, but still hesitated to help. You should go find Van Helsing instead, and get the professor to help since he is also a vampire, she said. Sherlock sighed. I'm afraid Van Helsing has either fled the city or is dead. I have searched everywhere and found no trace of him. We'll say instead of fled the city, we'll say abandoned the city or is dead. Mina scoffed. Why can't you find Van Helsing if you're supposed to be? The great detective thwarted again. I don't think you truly understand the urgency of the situation, Sherlock replied seriously, his angular features set grimly. I do not have time to search all of England for Van Helsing. But you are here now, Mina, and you are able to help now. Mina stared into the middle distance, afraid to get involved. And nothing. Well, I will say a plank of wood in front of her, afraid to get involved. Saying nothing for a long time. Finally, she said. I'm afraid to help, she admitted softly. I'm scared I'll just prove myself to be a monster. You are defined only by your actions, Mina, not by what you are, Sherlock told her gently, and I know Jonathan would want you to keep going despite the circumstances. Mina stayed silent, so Sherlock continued. What was the last thing Jonathan said to you, he asked. He said, I love you, Mina replied, her voice barely a whisper. Sherlock nodded. I cannot find clear evidence. They say vampires have no soul. Well, I cannot find any clear evidence that you have lost yours, Mina. Jonathan hated vampires, having been tormented by them, and yet he still chose to love you. Would he have loved someone without a soul? Here is the updated and edited text. Actually, I'm just going to write this bit myself. Despite herself, Mina sniffed, a tear falling down her cheek. I would wager that using your powers for good is one of the hardest things you have ever done, Madam Harker. But you did it. It was possible. No monster would have even tried to do what you did. Sherlock then produced something from his satchel. Amina recognized it as the black gown worn by the bride she had auburn-haired bride she had killed aboard the ship. If you disguise yourself as the missing bride, the others will have no idea that their sister is dead, Sherlock pointed out. It would be the perfect opportunity for you to sneak amongst them and sabotage their plans, whether that means removing the Pied Piper's flute or the ashes of Dracula. Sherlock stood up and began to leave the dusty attic. Stood up as if readying to leave. He paused at the trapdoor. I will be in Dr. Seward's study should you need me. Tonight. I sincerely hope you will be able to join us. We have to move against the brides now, before they realize their sister is missing. Ideally, we should act tonight. With that, Sherlock left a conflicted Mina holding the black bridal gown, the door swinging, the attic door snapping shut behind him with a loud thud. Mina sat in the attic alone, turning over the gown in her hands. The musty air was still and silent around her. She thought of everything Sherlock had said, everything she had been through. She thought of Jonathan and his final words of love to her, despite what she had become. Perhaps Sherlock was right. Perhaps she could still use this curse of vampirism for some good. The idea lifted her spirit slightly, and she found herself standing. She would go to Dr. Seward's study tonight, she decided. With new determination, Mina folded the black gown and changed into it, letting her blonde hair down around her pale shoulders. Let's flesh out this passage to show more than tell. I'm just going to ask it to retry that. Wasn't quite what I wanted. Actually, let's just open a new chat. Here is a chapter I have written. Please flesh out the last two paragraphs to show more than tell. There we go. That's more like what I'm... Sometimes you just got to give it the right context, because it doesn't do well without context, which is why I tell people to make sure your beats and everything are excellent. And this isn't actually as good as I thought. But it'll replay. This first paragraph works. But that first sentence was good. Let's see if there's another phrase in here I could take. Taking a deep breath, she steadied her emotions. That sentence is good. This sentence is good. She turned and descended the creaky attic stairs with quiet feline movements. She would go to Sherlock and do what must be done. There's something in here. I feel like there's a beat that I missed, or that the AI missed. Oh, no, this was supposed to end earlier. That's the problem. So all of this actually we don't need. With that, Sherlock left a conflicted Mina holding the black bridle cloud, the attic door snapping shut behind him with a loud thud. There we go. Boom. All right, we're done. So, well, we're done with these 4 chapters. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to be doing the next 4, 23 through 26. And then hopefully on November 30th, last day of November, we'll get the last 3 here. Those will go a little faster. But I wanted to get the 4 done when we can because, you never know how this is going to go. So, thank you all for being here. Again, don't forget my membership is closing at the end of November. So if you want to get in on that now is the time to do that. Let me just go through and answer a couple of last questions here. So Ray of Light says, I don't see Claude 1.3 in Poe, just instant and 2. So 1.3 is instant, I believe. The one you're looking for is Claude Instant 100K. Which is the first version of Claude that had the 100K token limit or token context window. And that's the one that came before Claude 2. So I'm pretty sure that's the one that you're looking for. Miss Player says it's hard to choose between Open Router and Poe when choosing Claude 2, which is worse for paying for Claude. It depends on how much you're using. If you are writing like tons and tons and tons, then you might spend more than $20 a month with Open Router. If you're only using it here and there, I mean, it's pretty cheap. How much Open Router charges? It's just a few cents here and there for each chat. Even for really like large contexts, it's usually not too, like I can run a super prompt and it costs me maybe 6 cents. The problem with that is that I found I'm not able to get the same large outputs in Open Router for whatever reason. It won't give me like the 2,000 or 3,000 words, even if I ask it to, stretch its limits by a lot. Sometimes it'll get so far and you can just ask it to continue and it will do that. So it's still possible. It's still running on the same technology, same model, but it does appear to be a little bit different. Whereas Poe matches what Claude, like the main Claude chat, it matches that a little bit better. Although I still don't find it to give me quite the same amount of output, even in Poe. So I'm still working that out. But if I were to do it now, I think I would divide the super prompt into smaller pieces and then maybe ask it to continue and write another like 5,000 words with the next couple of beats or something like that. AA says, I think Claude 2.1 may turn out to be better than Claude 2.0. Yeah, it might be. It's certainly gotten better than it was. I've been using it tonight and it's been absolutely no problem. I haven't been using it with any super prompts, but I've been using it in other contexts and it's been doing that just fine. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Evolution DL says Claude 2.1 works better now, but I don't know if the output is as good as Claude 2.0 as my usage of Claude dramatically reduced when it upgraded to 2.1. Yeah. I don't know either. So that's something I'll check. So far, like when I'm asking it to continue what I've already written, it does a decent job. The prose is okay. But I've yet to really do a lot of work getting longer outputs um, with it. So I need to do a lot more testing before I say definitively whether I think it's better than 2.0. 2.0 is still good. You can still use it in OpenRouter or Poe. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that's it for tonight, I think. Um, it's a little late here, 9:30, so I'm gonna head out. But thanks you all for being here again, and I'll